everybody. Welcome to the show. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How is it going this week for all of you? My name, if you're just meeting me, is Chris, and I am the host of this show. This is Pros and Cons Weekly Show, which I call the Weekly Spinner Rack, because at comic stores, they've got the spinner rack, and I do this once a week. Maybe I'm over-explaining things. I might be over-explaining things. Let's see, a bunch of people already in the chat room. So let me see. First of all, wow, thank you very much. From the Great White North, thank you, Kevin Connor. Very nice of you. We got here, we got like somebody called X. We've got Say No More, Gov. I love it. We've got Press Hello. Hello to Ken Dog. I did have a nice Thanksgiving. Thank you very much for that. That's so nice of you. Hello, Kyle. Hello. Okay, X is there again. We've got TARDIS Rider. I can get that out. Just give me a minute. Hello to Mandela Butterfly. Hello. This is going so fast. I can't keep up. Donatello Does Machines. Oh, okay. Hello, Steve Sorensen. Michael DeFonte. Let's get this potty started. All right, we're going for puns now. Let's see. Chameleon should team up with Paste Pod Pete to form Copy and Paste. That's the title of a story arc, and it should be, is what I'm saying. That should be an amazing Spider-Man title. That's pretty clever. That's pretty clever. Yes, let's go. It goes well, Kale. Goes very well. I hope it's going well for all of you. Let's see. Yes, exactly. You caught me over-explaining things. Lovely to see everybody. Thank you so much for joining the show, whether you're watching live or once this is archived up on the channel. Still dealing with some shoulder pain. I'm going to physical therapy. This rotator cuff injury to heal up. Sorry, just did something to but life is good. Let's see. A new comic books went up a few days ago, and I'm working on the next one. Taking me a little while to make this. I have another channel, if you don't know, called Comic Tropes, where I do edited video analysis of comic book history and a lot of times techniques. And boy, I'm doing one that I thought was just going to be fun, and instead it is just tragic. It is just, it's probably going to be the most depressing episode I ever make, but I'm pretty far into it. I still think it's interesting, but yeah, it's kind of a downer. But it is interesting, is all I can say. You know, that's why I decided to research this topic. Hey, look at who's here. Hello, Brian. There's my good buddy, Hooded Cobra Commander 788. He's got a great YouTube channel under that same name. Definitely recommend that if you like G.I. Joe stuff. Let's see. Is the stream a little rough for anyone else? Yeah, hard to understand. I am getting a lot of lag. I hope it's just me. Yeah, this seems to be a bit of an issue for me all of a sudden. Right now, I'm showing good stream health. By the way, nice to see you as well, EJ. And hello, Andy. Always lovely to have you here. Appreciate it. Let's see. Keith says the stream is a bit rough. Darn it. I don't know exactly what that issue is right now, folks. Okay, now all of a sudden I do see like that my stream health is dipping up and down a little bit. Why would that be, though? I'm thinking. I've got this connected like with a hard line, you know, like it's the Ethernet cable, so I'm not using Wi-Fi. I don't know. Let's see. Who is your internet service provider? Actually, I don't know. I have to ask my wife. She signed us up. It's not Comcast. We're using somebody else. Somebody else in the house doing something data intensive. I mean, Chrissy's watching YouTube upstairs, but that shouldn't really affect things because I'm uploading where she's downloading. We've got lots of download speed. Um, hmm. Sound is a bit tinny, but otherwise the video is solid from the Philippines. Well, thank you. Could be from the crummy weather. I wonder about that. That's the only thing I'm sort of thinking about. I just started to type no lag over here. The venue started lagging. Darn it. Darn it. There's very little I can do for that, folks, other than try to power through it. Oh, we do have Comcast. Well, you know what? Maybe it's worth. I'll just like I'll look into paying for whatever the next speed up is. I think we're at like the second from the very bottom. But I guess if this is sort of part of my job, I guess you could argue it that then I guess I need to look into that. I don't know about you guys. I hate dealing with the internet companies and the cable providers and stuff. They're just the worst. They're always just trying to upsell you instead of solve your problem. They're just never any fun to work with. The cats are streaming cat videos on another computer. It's possible. They have been rascals lately. That is definitely possible. Let's see. Hey, Jeannie, great to have you here. That's my sister. I think it's better now than it was. It literally may get affected the more I move and the faster I talk. That's that. um, I'm thinking fast on my end. A lag too. I'm seeing a lag on my end too. Darn. Have you watched the World Cup and Go Team USA? No, haven't really watched it. I have to admit, soccer isn't really my thing. I've gone to some games. I've watched some games. I've got some friends that are really into it. Can't really get into it too much for whatever reason. And all I've been focusing on is the drama behind the scenes. That interests me. Does anybody watch Last Week Tonight with John Oliver? Because last week's episode was about Qatar and FIFA and just what a mess that is. But hey, you guys are here to talk about comics stuff. So I've got some comics to review. Oh, by the way, there's a PO box if you're ever curious about sending something. I'll be doing essentially an unboxing and review of everything that people send in shortly. But there is a PO box if you want to do something like that. And let's get into some comic book reviews. There was a lot that came out this week, and then I've got some really awesome news, like comic book news this week. Awesome. Let's see. Time to jump on the Team USA bandwagon. Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm rooting for USA, but I just can't honestly claim to love soccer. It's I know that they're constantly moving back and forth, and that's action, but it's so low scoring. I like American football. What can I say? Nice. Hey, you're nice. So let me get into it. This first issue, what is it? This is the final issue of IDW's run on G.I. Joe. And that cover there is by a guy named Jamie Sullivan and has just pretty much every G.I. Joe character that appeared in the comic. Wow, thank you for the super chat, Michael DeFonte. Here's some money for the new stream speed. All right, thank you. Have you been doing well? I hope you are not getting burned out with making videos. I really appreciate the work you do. A little bit of burnout, but only because I have to, basically do two jobs, and doing two can get like mentally draining. But I love what I do. I'm not complaining. I love what I do here, and I love talking to you guys. Let's see. Buddy Coco says, funny, I'm looking at the same G.I. Joe comic right now. Here's what's interesting about this. Look, it's issue 300. If you haven't been reading G.I. Joe, that's not a great jumping on point, so I'm not going to really try to recap it. The writing is great. It's great. We've got a return of a really important character. That's awesome. We've got G.I. Joe and Cobra being nutty. But here's what's great. All right, this is the final issue on IDW. What does that say? That says to be continued. The balls on Larry Hama. to write the final issue in a run and not wrap up the story. It has not been officially announced. I know I mentioned it on the news and stuff that this is going to Skybound, but it has not officially been announced yet that this book is continuing. But Larry has said that he's written like at least the next 2 issues, and this ends with a to be continued, which I was not expecting. I sincerely thought, hey, it's the end of a run. IDW had this for 145 monthly issues, which is a huge run these days. That's a huge run. Because it's 145 on top of Marvel's originally 155. It's all in a row. That next run better come out soon because I love G.I. Joe and I want to see where this goes. But it ends on a cliffhanger. Oh my God. And it feels like a real cliffhanger because I don't know when the next issue is even coming out. What could be a good jumping on point? Honestly, the beginning of any arc. So this is issue 5. So if you jump to issue like 9 or something, it catches you up to speed. Good question, Arturo. Good question. Steve saying, if you haven't, you should watch Ted Lasso. Yes, we were talking about soccer earlier. Love Ted Lasso. Love that show. Not only hilarious, emotionally deep. Very, very good show. Great show. Great show. Let's see. Moving forward, we're past Halloween when this title launched, but this is a really funny anthology series. It's a horror anthology, which horror does work well a lot of times when you tell a short, 8 to 16 page horror story. You just get in and out. You just hit them with the premise, build a couple interesting characters, a little twist. It worked well for EC Comics up and through the 1950s. Creepshow, it just does 2 stories per issue. I think I preferred the first one a little bit more by Francesco Francavilla, and it says El Marlo Francavilla, so I assume that's his partner. Anyway, I can't really go into it too much because it's a short story. There's a twist. If you like horror, though, I am getting a Creepshow. You love Ted Lasso. I love it too. It's really, really good. I'm late, but I'm here. Well, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Folks, here's one I recommend very strongly. 8 Billion Genies. It's written by Charles Soule, art by Ryan Brown. I believe the book they last did together was Curse Words, which got a lot of acclaim. This is issue 6 of an 8-issue series. Everybody in the world gets a personal genie with one wish. And every issue jumps forward in time a certain amount. It was like the first 8 minutes, the first 8 hours, the first 8 days, etc. Now we're up to the first 8 years. So we see the impact on the world as people use wishes in interesting ways. Obviously, very selfish initially, or very silly, not thinking ahead usually. And now we're dealing with characters some of whom have grown up in this world as little kids and been born into this world and trying to figure out how to navigate such a world. It's very interesting. Andrew Jefferson, thank you. Ever read Jack Kirby's OMAC? Definitely. He ended on a cliffhanger to try to at least get one more issue, and instead DC changed the last 2 panels to explain that everything blew up and they all died. Yeah. Obviously, Jack Kirby was so frustrated with Marvel that he left to go to their biggest competition. And then DC treated him pretty bad too. He created some awesome characters there. Darkseid and the New Gods, they're going to last a long time. That's a great series of characters and a great world that he gave DC. He did a great job on Jimmy Olsen. But then DC treated him so bad, he ended up back at Marvel working on, Black Panther and Captain America again. And we kind of know how bad he was treated, and he was willing to go back to that. That was still better than working at DC. It's crazy. Anyway, I really recommend this story. It's just an interesting thought experiment, and fortunately, there's some diverse characters in terms of motivation and background and history, and it's great to see them grow and change. It really is. There's some people here that started very shallow that are now very interesting. So recommend 8 Billion Genies. Let's see. Local Seattle guy sending love from WSU. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. I appreciate that. Hey, look at that. Thank you, Mian Mian. Omak died of Poochie's death. So similar. Right. I have to go back to my home planet. Doot, doot, doot. Here's another one, folks. This was a strong week for floppies. Human Target. Boy, am I loving this book. The most important thing I can tell you is that I strongly recommend it. Just take a look at this Greg Smallwood art. He's always been a great illustrator in terms of drawing the human form, right? He's been good at storytelling. What I really like about this is the aesthetic he's given it, where some lines are very, very, very loose. You know, like look at like how loose he draws some of this hair, or in the background, just how simplified, a lamp and a door are. We're breaking it down to just very simple shapes sometimes. He's drawing just as much as you need to tell the story. The characters are incredibly expressive. And beyond all that, Tom King has a hell of a mystery going on. This one ends in a bit of a cliffhanger, saying that something that we've been assuming for the last several issues isn't so. I don't want to get into spoiler territory. It also deals with a main character being very paranoid now. He's down to maybe 4 days left before he dies from being poisoned, and he knows that. He's perspiring a lot. He's very jittery. He's convinced that Batman is coming after him. And then when Batman doesn't come after him, he's convinced that there's a good reason Batman wouldn't come after him. And he's just double, triple, quadruple thinking himself. It's an amazing romance that's very believable for some reason. The characters just gel, but the artwork is really something special here. It really is. Oh, that's a very interesting observation, Ringer. Peacock atmosphere. Yeah, I could see some of that. I really can, because there also is almost the 60s aesthetic to this, and the way that Greg Smallwood illustrates our main character, the titular human target himself, Christopher Chance. He does sort of look like, say, a Cary Grant in, what was he in, North by Northwest? Or maybe a little like Jimmy Stewart in something like Vertigo. There is a bit of an aesthetic like that. I can actually really see that. That's clever. This is a pretty special book. Does it in a linear order? Yes, it is linear. It is linear because we know from the beginning that he has about 12 days to live, and each day, each book, he's one issue closer to dying. I don't know how he's going to get out of it. There's a chance he could, but I don't know how that would make sense right now. Let's see. I'm about to take a dive into Human Target on your repeated praise. Well, the first 6 issues are available in trade paperback, so I recommend it. I recommend it. It's a great book. Like I said, this was a super strong week for comics because this is also a great one. This is the final issue of Dark Spaces Wildfire, which is essentially a heist type of story dealing with female prisoners who work fighting fires. But can't really get into it too much more than that, just because there are twists and turns in the final issue, as there is in any good heist or thriller. But you can sort of look, and obviously it's very atmospheric, and I that in the metaphorical sense as compared to how literal the atmosphere is, because they're dealing with a raging wildfire all around them. Oh, you know what I just noticed? This is so funny, folks. I think that there's a little printing error here. If you look really closely, you're going to see like a white triangle there and there. That's very hard to show you, but we've got a white triangle here and here that look like they were the tails of word balloons, and then the balloons were cut out. I don't know how that happened, but there was a composition error here by either the letterer, the colorist, or production. I don't know. Ha! Just came across that. That's a little funny. Well, it does not detract from how great the story is. We get to see the characters grow in a great way. It's a satisfying end, where it looked like it was being set up for tragedy as of the last issue. I don't know if it's exactly tragedy. It's a good story, though. Really good. Your G.I. Joe 300 had a printing error? What printing error was that? It's interesting. I discovered your channel in the spring and watched every single one of your videos over summer break. Wow, that's some marathoning. It was a lot. I could not get enough. Love your channel and keep it up. I'll do my best. Thank you very much for watching. That's really, really kind of Ghost Bones. Yep. I got every issue of this except number 2 in my pull box, so I haven't been reading but excited to finish. It's good, Zach. It really is strong. Here's another great one. And are we surprised? Does Neil Gaiman, I mispronounced that, does Gaiman make a bad comic? Obviously, we're going to like some more than others. Some might not necessarily be your taste, but I've never seen him make a comic that I would call bad. It's always at least interesting to me. And it's very interesting to see what he's doing with Miracleman, since Alan Moore's run basically ended things with the world's problems being solved. Well, Neil took that and ran with it, and instead is saying, like, well, look at the horror of this world where everything seems perfect, but do people truly have freedom? I don't know. And we're seeing it through the eyes of his young sidekick, who has been essentially cloned with his memories attacked, basically brought back to life. A very comic book superhero type of trope, isn't it? But the more the kid sees, the more horrified he is by this world, and I don't blame him. What's really fun, too, is, of course, these issues of Miracleman were originally made back in 1993, apparently. Excuse me. I thought it was late 80s. So this has some extras. It shows Mark Buckingham's original pencil art that he did in the 90s, and then it also compares that to the stuff that he's drawn in the 2022. And it was already really good. Mark Buckingham was already a good artist, but it's so interesting to compare the styling choices. And I'm going, oh, okay, he changed this shot a little so that it's a little less establishing the environment, but a lot more focusing on the emotion of the character, a little more close up on the face. Like, oh, okay, I get that. Or just like a panel to panel, like, oh, okay, that flows a little better. The extras in this are really special. Steve Sorensen says, Neil Gaiman's Eternals was above average. Yeah, but it wasn't bad, right? Dom points out that there's a humble bundle for a Lone Wolf and Cub comic bundle. 28 volumes. Is that the complete run? Somebody else will have to fact check that, because I don't know off the top of my head. That sounds like it could be the entire run. That sounds like it could be. So this is already a good story, okay? I'm telling you it's a good story. But look at all this bonus material so that you can compare 1993 art to 2022 art. 20 years difference. I mean, 19, but, you know, two decades. An artist is going to go through a lot of growth if they continue to work as a professional. Ideally. One of my big complaints about Rob Liefeld is he's fun. I don't think that he's an artist that's shown a lot of growth. Mark Buckingham is showing us this, and it's really interesting. So, good story. Love the bonuses in this. For a $4.99 book, yeah, I'm basically getting a full comic and almost a full comparison. Well, I am getting a full comparison. They're just printed a little smaller. I think these days, that does make this a pretty good value, $4.99. I think that comics are a little overpriced for floppies. I get why a lot of people prefer to binge a trade paperback. I think I do too, ultimately. But most comics are $4.99. You get a bunch of extras in this. I think that helps make it worthwhile. Cub is required reading, yes. Let's see, 30 years difference, not 20. Oh, 93, 2003. Oh, thank you, Kyle. Me do math good. Hey, I'm a comic book historian or something like that, not a mathematician. That was some pretty basic math that I just failed, but thank you. Mikado, Liefeld fandom is single-handedly, well, I think this would be tertiarily kept alive by Jim Rugg, Ed Piskor, and Tom Scioli. No, that's, I respect that Liefeld will still put out a book these days, and it sells. There are certain creators that's just the case for. They sell a book with their name, and I think that's really impressive. To us old people, hey, 90s feel like 20 years, not 30. That's for damn sure. That's for damn sure, thinking that through. Wow. I am so tempted to get all the original Eclipse back issues just to compare it with the Marvel recolor of Golden Age. That could be a really fun thing to collect. I totally see the appeal there. And honestly, most of those Eclipse issues, I don't think they're priced that high. I've definitely seen them at affordable prices at some comic book stores. So, does inventing really good paste need math? Not the way I do it. Here's one that's fun. I'll say that like these four are all sort of options for pick of the week. Oh man! In fact, let me just do this real quick. Which of these would I say was my book of the week between these? I would say, oh boy, that is a really hard choice. As good as that thriller is, I'm going to take that one out of the running. And as much as I love 8 Billion Genies, there have been a couple other issues that I loved a little bit more, but I do love the overall story. I think for a single issue, it would be between these because they each involve a bit of a character arc within the story as well as some world building. For value, I think it's this because of you can learn from it, comparing it to original art. There's a lot to learn from that. But for pure entertainment, I think I might go with Human Target. So now you've got a little bit of an idea of where I'm ranking things. It's not easy. Not easy. Evan had guessed it. Very, very nice. I am a mathematician, says Tit Goblin, because I made 10 disappear. I can also make 7, 8, 9. Just count them. It's so dumb. Kids joke. I have not been keeping up with either of those. I do someday want to catch up on Love and Rockets, but I have some Love and Rockets news later today. So let me wrap up some of these reviews because we're almost done there. We'll get into the news. The news is the fun stuff, right? Vanish. Look, imagine a sort of R-rated Harry Potter type of trio, sort of a Harry, Hermione, and Ron that were like a little more gritty and grounded. And now say that the Death Eaters still survived and try to pass themselves off as heroes. The main guy going to go after them. It's pretty bloody. It's pretty over the top, but it's a fun premise. This is an issue that I just blaze through, and then sometimes you're like, wait, how much did I just pay for that? But it is fun. It's very fun. Ryan Stegman, his art definitely reminds me of Greg Capullo circa his initial Spawn run. There's a lot of similarities there. It's fun. And here's another one that's just fun, okay? Sergeant Rock versus Army of the Dead. Written by Bruce Campbell, no help. Art by Eduardo Risso. It's Easy Company, Sergeant Rock and Easy Company, taking down Nazis that have created zombies. I don't need to recap it, but I hope you guys have read some Eduardo Risso books. There was a book he did in Argentina about a really young vampire that was good. 100 Bullets, he's super famous for, obviously. He's a great storyteller that has a really distinct art style. He's so brave with where he spots blacks, so brave. This is obviously a night raid, and let's give some props to the colorist here. That is Christian Rossi. Christian Rossi does the colors. Really, really solid stuff. After reading this, I would read more comics by Bruce Campbell. I would love to see what else he wants to do in comics because he's pretty darn good. I got to get me that Sergeant Rock. Andy, it's pretty strong. I can't call it like groundbreaking, but it's really fun. It's really fun. It feels very authentic, the way each of each of the Easy Company characters talk. They're distinct enough. It's good. Gotta go. See you in the archive. Thanks for stopping by. Wow, thank you, Nellax44. I love the new look. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. I did have a nice Thanksgiving. My wife cooked, I would argue, the best turkey she's ever cooked. She's cooked them several times. Boy, was this one good. We had a really fun time. Look at this hair. That's crazy. What am I doing? I look like David Lynch, or at least the David Lynch character. I think I'm done with Amazing Spider-Man. I'm going to tell my store that I'm ready to drop this title. I've said before, it's not working for me. I wanted to try this dark web crossover because I have to admit, I kind of like the basic premise, which is Ben Reilly is a clone, Madeline Pryor from the X-Men is a clone. They're going to and get revenge on both Spider-Man and the X-Men. Okay, cool. Angry clones. That sounds good. But you know what? This just doesn't make sense to me because I don't know these characters that well, I realize. Or at least I don't know Ben Reilly, and I don't know his girlfriend here. I don't even know her name. It wasn't she's not super memorable. And every few pages is done by a different artist, so I had trouble following the story. I don't know exactly what's going on here, but 1 minute Ben Reilly's talking with his girlfriend, and the next he's in a hell dimension called Limbo, just chatting up Madeline Pryor. And then Madeline Pryor turns the girlfriend into a supervillain called Hallows Eve, which I will say is a pretty cool design. That is a good design, but I just can't get it. Oh, it says Ginny. Just got back from the local comic store. Thank you, by the way, John Dorsey. Very nice of you. Thank you for the super chat. I had a bit of an Andrea Sorrentino spree. Old Man Logan. I'm stuttering tonight. Batman the Smile Killer. I've not heard of that one. And the new 10,000 Black Feathers. Just stunning beyond belief. In your stack, sir. No. Am I missing out? You're following all that from Andrea Sorrentino. Huh? All right. I appreciate the recommendation. You have me curious. Is that the new JRJR Spidey book? Well, he actually doesn't draw this issue. I assume he's still the regular artist. This one's got a bunch of fill-in artists. Michael Dowling, Kyle Hotz, that's fun. Terry Dodson, he's good. Ryan Stegman, he's good. But it makes for a bit of a disjointed read. I didn't like it. I just didn't like it. Here, we'll just do that. I'm back to normal. And the last one I picked up for a weekly comic. Well, hey, Frank Miller. Just like I went ahead and picked up because I liked the original Ronin so much, I picked up a great copy of book 1. In the mid-'80s, Frank Miller could do no wrong as far as I'm concerned. This almost reads like a parody of how Frank Miller writes, because this is Ronin Book 2 through Frank's new company, and I wanted to at least give it a shot, because I've really loved Frank Miller through a lot of different books. But there's also some stuff that I have to admit that I don't love. It took me a long time to sort of admit that to myself. When Dark Knight Strikes Again came out, I was like, huh, it must be me. You know, I must be missing something here. This is more clever than I'm thinking. But that's an interesting question from Bill Wist. Just how many pages is it? Quite a few. I don't know. It doesn't number them. If I just glance at it, I'm going to say it could be 48. Let's see. There's the halfway point. Is that more? Oh, it's more than that. 14. It's like a 64-page book. It's like a super rare to see a fill-in issue on a JR book. It makes me wonder if he's not that passionate about this run, to be honest, Andy, because I agree. It makes me wonder. So we've got some cliche dialogue, at least if you've ever read Frank Miller before. If you haven't, maybe this isn't too bad if it was your introduction. The art layouts are by Frank, and then Philip Tan does the finished art. And you can tell sometimes, like, I want to find there's a certain set of poses that definitely look like Frank Miller. Yeah. That looks like something out of Sin City, that shot. And this one looks like, I don't know, how Frank Catwoman, pose. I can tell the layouts are by him. Philip Tan, just to be clear, great art. I do not dislike this art. But the story doesn't connect with me very much. I don't even really want to go into explaining the plot too much, just because it just doesn't interest me a whole lot. That also looks like a Frank Miller pose, but I do admire very much what they've done with the negative space here, as well as using this sort of screen tone pattern on the back. It looks nice. It looks nice. I wish that they would use more of this screen tone, because a page like this looks almost manga-esque. I like some of that. Basically, it follows the lady in the future that sort of fell for the original Ronin, and now she's going up against demons. And then all of a sudden, her little baby, something magical just happens out of nowhere, and he just starts talking, and he can carry a sword like this little baby. I don't know. I'm with you on Frank Miller. I loved him back in the day, but now I honestly don't like his stuff, and I really hate his art now unless a good inker cleans it up. And I'm not even that concerned about where his art is at. I don't mind him being experimental there. I would love to see him challenge a bit more with dialogue, because I think he falls back on essentially his own tropes. He has people talk in a certain way ever since his Sin City books. But you go back, and I don't think that Batman Year One or Martha Washington or Big Guy and Rusty the Robot, I don't think that they sound the same. I think that these days, just a lot of the dialogue sounds similar, which I don't love. By the way, I don't remember how much this cost, because there's no price on it anywhere. It's big. It looks great. I just didn't feel that it read that well. I wanted it to read better, but it does look good. So if you're a fan of Philip Tan, or you're a Frank Miller completist, or a massive fan of Ronin, and you just want more out of that world, I could understand getting a book like this. I can. There's some good storytelling choices in this. There are, but the dialogue sort of keeps it from being something I love. And then I always pick up some back issues. This week I found a great copy of Rocket Raccoon. That's some early Mike Mignola art. And the first two issues of DN Agents. That was a book that Eclipse published, written by, hold on. Who am I thinking of all of a sudden? The guy that writes all the dialogue in Gru with Sergio. He's a great comics historian. He knows tons of stuff. Art by Will Mignot, which is pretty darn strong for an indie book of this era. I'm I'm totally forgetting the writer. It doesn't matter. Let's move forward. Let's move forward. Mark Evanier, thank you. Anytime I forget a name, because I'm terrible at names, I can count on you guys to help out. Boom. Look how many people knew it. Yep. Thank you all. I appreciate that very much. Mark, I do. So it was fun to find DNA agents. I'm going to work on inking Deathstroke. I sort of lightly laid out Deathstroke. Oh, you know what? Before I even continue with the news, let me just temporarily do some very light reviews, because my sister here is saying something. Did anyone watch the Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special? I did, and I liked it. I thought it was a lot of fun. It was pretty much exactly the level of, we'll say, spectacle that I would expect. It was a TV show, but they clearly were able to take advantage of filming this during filming the movie. They have their sets, they have their actors, got like the props and everything. It looked fun. I don't want to spoil it. It's got a few good Christmas songs in it, including 2 originals. It was very funny. I thought that what they did with Mantis was great. They really made her an interesting and likable character. So yeah, it's a blast. It's pretty quick. I think it's like about 40 minutes. So it's a pretty quick special, but it is fun. So I do recommend that. But here's something I really recommend. It's not really comics. It's not comics at all, but I do recommend it. The movie Glass Onion. On Thanksgiving, we ate kind of early. So did a friend of mine. And my friend John and I decided to go out to a late night movie and see Glass Onion. That is a mystery movie. It's next in the Knives Out sort of world. So the only character that continues is the main detective that Daniel Craig plays, Benoit Blanc. Funny character. Written and directed by Rian Johnson. That guy is great at mysteries. If you haven't seen it, I really recommend a movie by him called stars Joseph Gordon-Levitt. It's a high school student solving a murder. He's like a detective. It's really interesting. It's really good. I like Rian Johnson's movies a lot. I think he's a really interesting filmmaker. I'm not going to tell you anything about the plot because it's a mystery. I can't give you anything. It's a mystery that plays fair. It's a mystery that it builds in an interesting way. The storytelling is very clever. And you know what's great? It's funny. It's really, really funny because you've got a cast of some real eclectic weirdos. And there's a good story reason for that. I don't want to say anything about it. It's coming to Netflix within a week, but they have a 1-week window playing in theaters and very next. So I was very glad that I did go out to see it in the theaters. I had a great time. Definitely going to be one of my top 10 of the year. So, thank you, Andy, for the backup there. Yes, Brick is a really great, underrated movie. It's really cool. John Dorsey says, regarding Andrea Sorrentino, all 3 books are written by Jeff Lemire. Oh, okay. Old Man Logan, The Batman, and Lemire's image property, The Bone Orchard Mythos, his preferred artist. Oh, okay. Well, I got to educate myself about that. Anyway, because I liked it so much, I wanted to point that out and acknowledge just how excellent that movie was. One of the best I've seen in a while. Definitely going to be a favorite of mine for the year. So for whatever that's worth, I recommend it. And with that, I think we should get started talking about some comic book news, because that's probably why most people tune in. So let's see what we got here. I'm adding this to the stream, and we will go to the next slide. Right, that's right. Comic creators flocking to Hive. I think even if you're not on Twitter, it's pretty hard to have ignored the drama that's going on with that social media platform. I like Twitter a lot, but Twitter is definitely going through some tough times under its new management. Obviously, Elon Musk is creating a lot of drama for himself with some very rapid choices on how to improve things. There are reasons for that really aren't worth getting into on a show like this. But he wants to make it profitable fast, and he's making some questionable decisions, and it's impacted the user experience. I don't think anyone would argue that it hasn't impacted the user experience. That is to say, a lot of people are looking to see what other options might be out there for social media platforms where you can sort of share and talk about what's going on. It's not a perfect platform, Hive. I'm not going to say that, but I was just going to talk about the fact that it is a fact that a lot of people are signing up with new platforms to test it, see if they take off, because I think a lot of people are potentially ready not to use Twitter, at least as their primary social media account. People, including me, have tried Mastodon. Little clunky to get signed in. It's okay. Hive Social works a lot like Twitter. It lets you post more text. It's a little slower to load, initially anyway. And there's not as many people there. But it is growing fast. DC Comics, at least according to Bleeding Cool, has encouraged its creators to use Hive and to use the hashtag Comics Twitter to sort of get people engaged. Right now, here's the biggest problem with it. It's only available as an app. It does not have a web-based browser. I think that that's a big problem for any social media platform. People want to be able to use their computer, not always their phone. So that is an issue that needs to be addressed fast if they want to survive. But in the last week, it crossed 1 million users, which is definitely pretty big. It crossed that fast, too. It's a really new app that has only been out since 2019, and for the first couple of years, it only had, in the tens of thousands. So it's grown, it's exploded fast. I think it's pretty cool. Here's a smattering of some of the people that joined that just happen to have good followings. Gail Simone, Tom Brevoort, Tom Taylor, Dan Slott, Becky Cloonan, Daniel Warren Johnson, Scott Snyder, James Tynan, Kurt Busick, Sean Phillips. I bet some of you are on it already. I am. If you look at Comic Tropes, yeah, I signed up. Why wouldn't I? Even if I'm not going to use it, I want to stake out my own name. You know what I mean? So it's an interesting option. I think it needs some work to compete, but Twitter is definitely having plenty of its own issues. So, yeah, I've got a good buddy from Milwaukee who is currently on a trip in New Zealand, and he keeps telling me about all these problems that are happening for him with Twitter over there. So I think that the sort of resources are being stretched thin outside of the US anyway. So we've got some issues. Is Hive a spinoff of Bumble? No, I think it's its own thing. How many comic creators are in a smattering? Probably at this point, thousands. Yeah, it's interesting. Almost anyone you can think of that has a decent following on Twitter in the world of comics does seem to be on Hive. Does seem to be on there. Let's see. Eric Larson and Bill Sienkiewicz are also on Hive. I love those guys, and my mindsets line up with them a lot. I love both those guys, too. I really do. They have interesting stuff to share. Can you tell us about the cake gag from your latest video? Sure. Coming up with some sort of an intro gag for Comic Tropes is low on my priority list when I'm making a video. First, I'm writing and recording it, and then if I think of something that seems to make a little bit of sense, I will add it. So that was a very last-minute thing where I basically edited the whole episode, and I don't know, all of a sudden I just thought it would be really funny to fall into a cake like Three Stooges style. So I went to the 24-hour grocery store because it was pretty late at night actually, and tried to find a fully made cake or pie, and I really couldn't. So I had to sort of find the ingredients for it. I had to buy like frosting and like a base cake and sort of put that together. And I don't know. I just found it funny to do something so slapsticky. Um, I also had a limited range, like since I had to record it myself. Um, I set my camera in my kitchen, and I couldn't really get a lot of headroom or too much to the sides, because if I pulled back too much, I was just too far away. I don't know. It's all to say that I had a small area that I could do all of this in, and so like I just went very silly and broad with my trip. Wow. Yeah, Hive is pretty slow. Took like 10 seconds to load up. That does happen to me a lot, EJ. I've noticed that. It's frustrating. My favorite intro gag is still the spaghetti one. That's right. That's right. When I spilled the whole pot of spaghetti, I forgot about that one. That's very similar. Very similar. I don't know. It amused me. There's I think some comments saying like that it's cringe. That's fair. I have to do stuff that interests me. So that's all it was just me being silly. It was a last minute idea, and I'm glad I did it. The one where I speak Spanish. Oh yeah. That was for finding those Spider-Man comics that they were allowed to make in Spain. Marvel gave them permission to tell stories in between the existing issues. That was really interesting to get in there. Yeah, it's not cringe. I'm in on the joke. Exactly. I know exactly what I'm doing. I thought it was funny. Which intro gag required the most cleanup? Oh, the one where I got shot. that was a review of Immortal Hulk, and I had to build a type of device that could explode some blood out of my chest so that a dummy like was supposedly shooting me. That was a lot of cleanup. That was a lot of cleanup because the blood really went everywhere. Blood is. That was, yeah, I'm pretty sure that would have been an example of the most cleanup I had to do for something. Thanks for asking. That's nice of you. We've got more news though. That was just one that I thought was interesting. Here's another cool one that I don't want people to miss out on. Klaus or Claus, however you want to pronounce it. There's a Kickstarter for it. What is it? Well, the tagline itself says it's the man who would be Santa Claus dared to challenge the dark forces of magic and malevolence. Look, this is a compilation of the Claus issues as a hardcover, written by Grant Morrison, art by Dan Mora. I think that's a lot to recommend it right there. Steve Sorensen, thanks for the super chat to say this, buddy. My fave intro was when you got married. That was very nice of Chrissy. I asked her, I was like, I just have an idea. I was like, we're all dressed up. Are you okay with this though? There's not like, it was a very small wedding, just like a couple people there. So it wasn't like really putting them out, but I was like, hey, would you be okay with this? Like, because this sounds funny to me. And she was like, yeah, that is funny. Go ahead and do it. So that's part of why I married her. She has a similar sense of humor. Was it an opening gag or a cutaway joke when you turned into a horse by watching TV? That was an opening gag. I'm pretty sure. It's hard to remember. Didn't realize Dan Mora drew Claus. Yeah, an early thing that he drew. So a great creative team. And you might be like, that sounds gimmicky, but look, can you go wrong with Grant Morrison and Dan Mora? I would argue, not really. There's 16 days left, and guess what? It's already reached its goal. It had a goal of 10,000. Last time I checked earlier today, it was already past $90,000. So all that is to say, if you signed up now, it's already going to get fulfilled. This is just an opportunity to get something at a good price. This comes through Boom Studios. It is interesting to see some of these publishers running a Kickstarter just to be sure that there's enough of an audience there. But it's a good way to make sure that the people that are getting it get it, and that they're getting it at a price that they like. If you pledge tonight before midnight Eastern Standard Time, you have the option to get a silkscreen poster by Dan Mora, as well as the deluxe hardcover in a slipcase, if you care about that. So that's like sort of a special early bird thing tonight. Just to be clear, you have to be patient because they're saying that they don't expect to ship it until November 2023. But I do think that Boom Studios, Grant Morrison, and Dan Mora have a good reputation. I think that it's worth trusting them. I think it is. You are lucky to have a partner like her. Trust me, I agree. She's amazing. I'm very, very lucky. Pretty sure Claus was Dan Mora's first American comics. Okay, that could very well be. That could very well be. Because the first stuff I was aware that he did was Claus and, what's the one that he did with Mark Miller? It's all of a sudden I'm terrible at names. Interesting. It's already at 93,000. Well, I just thought it was worth passing on. Every once in a while, I mention a solicitation or a Kickstarter that I just think sounds good. I think that this is one I'm going to support, so I thought I'd pass it on. Do I read Tano Matsumoto? If so, I don't. What have you read, and do you like it? My favorite thing he has done has not been translated into English, but the French name is Le Rêve de mon Père. I'm guessing. I don't know how to speak French. I was trying to get it right. Sounded cool to me. But guess what? There's a heck of a lot more news. You thought I was going to swear, but I don't do that. Okay, last week I did that. But normally I don't do that. Mark Grunwald's ashes are going to be put in a comic book again. How many people out there are aware of the late Mark Grunwald? I liked Mark. He was the writer on Captain America when I started reading it. He wrote it for over 10 years. I don't know exactly how long, but 10 years at least. He was also an editor at Marvel. He was the continuity expert. The character Mobius in that Loki show, he's based on Mark Grunwald, both visually with the mustache and personality-wise, just being an expert on continuity type stuff. I feel he means Teiyu Matsumoto, the black and white techno concrete dude. Oh, maybe. I don't know. So anyway, Mark Grunwald passed away back in '96, only 43 years old. I consider that pretty young. Heart attack. Well, his widow, Catherine, was on the Dear Watchers podcast, and she said that she's working to now include his ashes in a comic book in specifically Contest of Champions, which he worked on. Contest of Champions was the first maxi series that Marvel ever did, by the way. That was just the year before they did Secret Wars. It was a big deal at the time to do something like that. It was an undertaking. He previously had his ashes put in the ink of the Squadron Supreme trade paperback when that was initially offered. That was they did that shortly after he passed away. He wanted to be part of comics, so they put his ashes in that. Well, now Catherine is trying to honor him again. This, for Contest of Champions, is going to be called an ashograph, which is apparently a resin replica of his signature that will contain his ashes. Like his ashes will be mixed in with the ink. They're only printing 100 copies. I don't know exactly how they're doing the rights with that or anything, so it's super rare, obviously. It's going to be at certain comic book stores and conventions. Catherine's going to have more details on that soon, including, they say, plans for a 2023 event in New York City. Will that be Comic-Con? I don't know. But I thought it was interesting. Ashes aside, a reprinting of Contest of Champions seems like an odd choice. I think it's a really fun book, by the way. It's a really fun one. I thought Bill Mantlo wrote Contest of Champions. Did it have multiple writers? I believe it did have multiple writers because I think Jim Shooter also helped write that one. That's a bit creepy, but I can completely believe Grunwald would want that. His widow said, it's creepy, but it's cool. It's what he wanted. He wanted to be part of the comic. And I don't know. I think it's kind of cool, actually. I do. What was I missing there? I like the Squadron series. Yes. Proto Injustice. I could see that. Yeah. Squadron Supreme, if you haven't read the original, man, it's a dark take on analogs for the DC superhero universe. And it's a pretty cool series. It really is. I recommend it. Maybe I recommend too much, but I recommend it. Hello, thanks for jumping in. I think Roger Stern also contributed. Wow, yeah, so it did have a lot of people involved. It was a big deal. Didn't Kiss put their blood in a comic? Allegedly. They pricked their fingers and put a drop of blood into the ink. I don't know if they actually did, but that's the alleged thing. They said they did, so I guess they did. I think putting a drop of blood is actually grosser than putting in your ashes. Yeah, there's something grosser about that to me. I don't know. Yeah, I say allegedly just because Gene Simmons of Kiss is a guy that will market himself. He'll say anything to sell, whatever product. I mean, they make like Kiss branded coffins, they probably thought that just sounded cool. So did they do it? I don't know. Maybe. Whoa, look who's here. We've got the publisher of Dynamite, folks, Nick Barucci with us. Whoa, that's a really big super chat. I didn't even notice. Oh my God, Nick. And he's in Christmas colors there. Chris, didn't know you had got married. I did. Here's a gift, and hopefully you guys can get a nice dinner or use it as you see fit. Oh my goodness. That's like a really big Popeyes meal. Everyone, please hit that thumbs up to show support to Chris. Likes are free. Support is priceless. Love these shows. Nick, that's very generous. That's really amazing. A lot of people in the chat just saying wow. That's incredible. Thank you, Nick. That's very kind of you. Hopefully I can help pay some of that back at some point. Just Nick doesn't really toot his own horn. In fact, I think, Nick, you should sort of toot your own horn and toot Dynamite Comics horn more. You've got a bit of a platform, but when I was first recovering from COVID, which is going back like 2 years or something at this point, I did a few live streams, also on my Comic Tropes channel, and Nick was somebody that was watching at that point and giving me some super chats. So he's just always been very kind to me, and I thought I'd share that. That's pretty nice. So yeah, there we go. Cheese, you're putting it in context. I have no excuse not to improve my internet. So hopefully it does not. It's not as glitchy, but yeah, you give it back by giving us great shows. I hope so. I want to. But yeah, hopefully working on it. Nick and I have talked, and hopefully we can bring you guys something together at some point. That would be really exciting. We'll see. I want to make it happen. But Nick's a good guy. Well, I hope that this one, even though it was a little creepy for news, was also kind of fun. I thought it was pretty unique because aside from Kiss putting that drop of blood in their comic, allegedly, I don't think anybody else has put their blood or ashes in a comic. Just like Kiss, maybe. Mark Grunwald for sure, and his widow wants to do it again. Oh, the lag has gone away? All right. Yes, Wukong, I will be getting to that news. There is some big manga news that affects a lot of people. I'll try to explain that the best I can in a little bit. Moving on. Steve Ditko auction. Steve Ditko's pretty amazing creator. All of us are gonna love him for Spider-Man no matter what, and of course, his he created Doctor Strange, the Creeper, the second Blue Beetle. He did definitely a bunch of stuff. Very unique art, I would say. You could tell that it was Steve Ditko's art as compared to just a house style. I thought that he had a good visual look. Very interesting person. One of the episodes I made of Comic Tropes that I'm really proud of is talking about who Steve Ditko was. Because he was fiercely independent and just believed his own philosophy and stuck to it no matter how that affected him financially. So very interesting man, very interesting life. Anyway, of course he's passed for a while. Yes, thank you, Nick. We're getting a bunch of good views today. We're not like the H3 podcast with 50,000, but we're doing all right. Oh yeah, Hawk and Dove. Hawk and Dove is super memorable. Are any of them as big a hit as Spider-Man? Like, no, not even Doctor Strange really comes close to Spider-Man, but I would argue still some pretty interesting characters, some really interesting stuff. He was clearly a guy that had big ideas beyond being an artist. Anyway, long since departed. His estate, basically his family, is going to be auctioning off some stuff. PBA Comics, that's a subset of an auction house called PBA Galleries. I forget what PBA stands for. It doesn't really matter. Anyway, it's an auction house. And they've announced the Spidey sale starting December 8th. So just over a week from now, if you guys were curious, what are they going to be selling? They're going to be selling his personal copies of comic books. Just to be clear, that would include things like Spider-Man #1 and things like that. So it's some valuable comics, aside from the fact that Steve Ditko owned them, and they're certified. You can see here, each book is going to come with a certificate of authenticity signed by Ditko's brother, Patrick, and the CGC will mark it as from the collection of Steve Ditko. There's the link if you are interested in putting in a bid, but look, can any of us actually afford these things? What was it? I think Amazing Fantasy 15 went for $3.6 million within the last year at an auction. So you sort of add the fact that they're coming from a pretty famous person's private collection. I have to imagine some of these could go for literally millions. And it just sort of makes you sad that the family doesn't have, say, his original art to auction instead. But in my interview with Larry Hama, he went into detail about how Marvel used to keep all of their original art, and a lot of people had keys to that closet and would just yank original art pages, and more than half of everything that Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko did was just given away or sold to people, because the editors and just about anybody with keys had access to that. It's a little sad to think that it did not go back to the artist or their family or anything like that. I assume Jonathan Ross will be bidding. Yeah, that's a great point. Jonathan Ross is a British presenter, talk show host, and a huge fan of Steve Ditko. If you've never seen it, he did a really interesting documentary called, it might have been called Finding Steve Ditko. It might have been called Searching for Steve Ditko. I can't remember off the top of my head. But he came to New York, met with Neil Gaiman, and they went to his apartment and just knocked on the door because Ditko wouldn't really make an appointment or anything. They knocked on the door to see if they could talk to him. He let them in, and they did talk, and they talk about that, but he would not allow cameras in. So we did not get to see what Steve Ditko looked like, old or anything, but it is still a pretty interesting little documentary and a look at a fairly reclusive but very interesting comic book artist. Really interesting. Let's see. Tom Brevoort just talked about Gil Kane stealing art and selling it on his Substack. I assume Tom Brevoort's Substack. Yeah. Yeah, he corrects it there. Like I said, I think just about anybody that had access would be going in there and selling and giving away some of that art. So it's a little depressing to think that the art, not that it was given away or anything, just that it was treated so callously, yeah, it's too bad. It's too bad. But it will be interesting to see how much these original books, like Doctor Strange and Spider-Man, and presumably some other stuff, goes for. Oh, thanks. It was called In Search of Steve Ditko, says Ultimate Spider Plush. That's a great name. Pretty sure you can find that on YouTube. As I recall, it was something like 30 to 45 minutes. It could be longer, but I think it was relatively short. Corresponded with Neil Gaiman on it, and he said that Steve looked just a little older, like your uncle. Oh, you did? That's interesting. That's really interesting, Nick. Whoops, hold on. Let me lock something. Bots, thank you. Yes. That's. Andy says, Kane was famous for walking off with others' artwork. Amazing artist, though. I didn't know that. This is news to me. Yeah, I've always thought of Gil Kane as a very interesting artist. As far as those artists in the sort of 60s Silver Age, among the best. He definitely made characters like the Atom and Green Lantern look a lot cooler than I would argue they would have looked otherwise. I've never heard these sort of rumors that he would take art. But Tom Brevoort isn't necessarily a gossipy guy, so if he's willing to say that, he must be very, very confident that that's the truth. I think of Tom Brevoort as a very reliable guy, so that's interesting. More news, if you insist, folks. There's some really good stuff here, so let's see what we got. Let's mention this real quick. Love and Rockets. This makes me feel old. It's the 40th anniversary of Love and Rockets. Yeah. I think that technically all three Hernandez brothers were working on it in 1981, but it's been coming out consistently since 1982 for sure. So they're calling this their 40th anniversary. Still being created by Jaime and Gilbert Hernandez. Their brother Mario helped write stuff early on. Each of the Hernandez brothers does their own separate story, but they publish it in a book called Love and Rockets. And what's cool is there's just not that many books that are dramas. They're not. These aren't sci-fi. They're not horror or superhero. Although, to be fair, the first few issues did have a world where there were superheroes in it, but that sort of quickly went into the background. Yeah, great series. It's great. Fantagraphics is issuing, well, they have issued a new box set of the first 50 issues. Right now, if you go to Fantagraphics, it is sold out. I'm not surprised. This is a pretty popular book, and I'm sure that their print runs are relatively low because of the expense. It retails for $400. That's not a cheap set. But what they're doing here is they're not just putting it in trade paperbacks, they're creating exact facsimile versions. You've probably seen some facsimile versions of Marvel and DC books at the comic book stores lately, things from the 70s, 60s, 80s, whatever. They create facsimiles, as in the original art, but also the original ads, the letters pages, the indicia, things like that are all replicated. So that's what they're doing here for Love and Rockets. So the story is across 7 volumes, plus an 8th that has essays and interviews. Yeah. So let's see. I got my box set pre-ordered at my local comic shop. Yep. Nice. Love and Rockets 1 through 4, best comics ever made. Master class in comics in 4 issues. Really, really good. And yes, Andrew Jefferson, Neil Gaiman did tell sort of a fantasy story in Amazing Fantasy 1000 about meeting Steve Ditko and imagining Spidey was there too. So that was another look at them meeting the legend, Steve Ditko. But that is pointing out. Great point, Victor. Yes, the colors are often screwed up in those recreated comics. I did an episode about that. In my opinion, what they should be doing when they create these facsimiles, just get a high-res scan of the actual comic. That way you can account for how the color looks on newsprint properly. And if you need to touch it up, fine. But what they're doing is they're taking the original color guides, assigning those same colors, but printing it on totally different paper. It's much brighter, it's much whiter and thicker. It totally changes the mood of these of these pages. Those colorists knew what they were doing back in the day. They knew that they were printing on a certain type of paper and that it would look, you could argue muddy, but it would just look, like it would look the right way. Anyway. Oh, that's very helpful. Look, I don't love giving Jeff Bezos my money, but I do like a good deal. And yeah, Andy says that Love and Rockets 40th is $360 on Amazon right now. Who doesn't want to save $40? That's pretty cool. I'll probably be ordering that, if I'm being honest. Newsprint look would be a bonus. Randy, lovely to have you here, buddy. Always love having you here. Let's see. The Chip Kid way of scanning a comic is the way to go. Agreed. I guess I haven't seen what Chip Kid has done in terms of scanning and reproducing that, but yeah. Am I a fan of modern recoloring in general? Recoloring? Not really. I'd rather see it presented the way it was originally intended. I'm not against the way artists color today. I think that they're basically, at this point, they're incredible painters that can add quite a great deal of definition to the artwork, make it look just amazing, no question. It isn't right for every style of art, but yeah, there's a lot to like with modern coloring techniques. But somebody like, say, Marta Gracia, I think that work always looks really well rendered, but doesn't obscure the artwork, which is something I'm always concerned about. It might not be authentic, but the bright pop colors on an old comic reprints make me think of old comics. Fair. Let's see. I like modern recoloring sometimes. Okay. At the very least, I would think that with modern tech, they could have the colors adjusted to take the tone of paper into account. I would think so. So that's just me promoting a book that I think is cool. But we've got more news coming up. What do I mean by that? Here's a good one. An interesting one. Donny Cates. Sorry, a piece of paper fell. Donny Cates has quit the Hulk. I wasn't expecting that. He seemed to be very excited and proud of what he was going to be doing there. Now, I've talked about how the run wasn't really for me. I didn't love the story direction, but I do generally like Donny Cates' work quite a bit. I think he's very talented, and it was a surprise that he's leaving Hulk, because the original solicitation for up through Hulk 12, which would come out in February, said that it was by Donny Cates and artist Ryan Ottley. Okay, then over here we've got Ryan Ottley's tweet on November 19th, and he says, Hulk 12, February, another issue that I am the writer and the artist for, Come see what this dork Otley is going to do with the rest of the Hulk Planet arc. Wait, another issue? Yeah, Ryan tweeted that he's going to be writing and illustrating both issues 11 and 12. So people were obviously concerned, like, oh, what does this mean for Donny? On the 21st, Donny Cates posted this saying, hey guys, I'm okay, just needed to breathe and deal with a bunch of life. Anyway, yeah, no fear. I've been working with and a bunch of Marvel editors in the background on something insane that will you'll know it when you see it. Love you guys. See you soon. Okay, so I guess we shouldn't be concerned about his health or anything. I was surprised that he left the title. So I don't know exactly what's going on there. Hopefully he is okay and that's not a big deal. Because I generally do like Donny Cates' work quite a bit. But the Hulk idea he had just wasn't quite for me, at least not coming off of Immortal Hulk, which I will argue was a fantastic take on the Hulk. I really think it was strong. I think it'll go down as one of Hulk's best runs. But who knows? It's surprising. I'm not too surprised. There are always new people coming on board to new stories. Well, that's true. Quits doesn't fit Hulk, if you ask me. Maybe you meant Cates doesn't fit Hulk? I don't know. Vanish is dope. Is he still doing that? Yep, he is. It was a weird direction to go with Hulk. No question there. No question there. Even if we don't like it, Hulk is still a pretty darn popular book for Marvel, so that was just a surprise to see that big change. So I do hope that Donny Cates is doing well. I think he's a pretty likable guy. I think he has some very interesting ideas, and he's done some interesting stuff. To be fair, mostly at places like Image, but still. Bear with me, I'm just doing a little bit of fine detail here. And then I'll get back into the comments and get back into the news. Still got my big thumbnail news to talk about. So we aren't done by a long shot. We've got lots to go. Let's see. Nick is counting these likes and watches. Let's see, 85 likes. So let's rally and get a few more likes. I'm doing fine, Nick, especially after your generous donation. I'm doing good. But that's super nice of you. Thank you. Let's see. I read someone saying it was something about his drug addiction. That sounds like gossip to me, Arturo. It's an easy way to go just because of his past history. But if he's still online and saying that he's still working at places, I'm not going to jump to the worst conclusion, at least not yet. I want him to be doing well, so I'm not going to jump there quite yet. Black Phoenix says he's supposedly leaving Thor 2. For now, that's just a rumor. It's easy for those rumors to spread. I was just talking about the facts that are both Ryan and Donny themselves. They obviously know. Steve, thank you for the super chat. Let's see. Dream MCU show, The Wrecking Crew. What is yours? You'd like to see The Wrecking Crew? What would I like to see? An MCU show specifically? Who hasn't really been explored? Maybe probably somebody that wouldn't necessarily get their own solo movie would be good. Like a Darkhawk or a Speedball, and then someday you throw them into Nova or Guardians of the Galaxy or New Warriors or something like that. Because I thought that the Miss Marvel show, for instance, worked pretty well. Yeah, cheese your nose. Pace Pot Pete, starring me as Pace Pot Pete. What was Donny Cates' biggest Marvel work so far? His biggest Marvel, like the best known Marvel work? Probably his current Thor run, right? I don't know. No, you know what? What am I thinking? Venom. Yeah. I mean, he created Null. I think what he did with with Null and Venom was probably his biggest so far. Yeah, Venom. Oh, an X Factor show. Cool. Alpha Flight. I think I've got a Canadian in the chat room. I've got a Canadian in there. Power Pack. Yeah. I'm calling myself Pasteball Pete now. Pasteball Pete is too big for Disney Plus. Maybe not too big for Disney Plus, right? Let's move on. It's already 6:25. I've got to get to some more news for you folks. Let's talk about the big one. What do I mean with my thumbnail where I'm talking about manga creators being worried that a lot of manga could theoretically go away? That sounds like fear-mongering, but that's sincerely what we're seeing from some of the news coming out of Japan. I'll explain. First of all, this first bullet point here does not explicitly refer to just comics, but Japan, it says will implement. They have, I guess, implemented this new system at the end of October. And it's unpopular with members of creative industries who use pseudonyms because under this new system, invoices can only be considered verified. Like they're only gonna honor an invoice if individuals file them using their real names. Up to now, Japan has allowed people to create invoices under pseudonyms. Who would be using that? Manga artists, of course, virtual YouTubers. The comic book system works very different in Japan than it does here. It's very normal for an artist to have a small studio, which really could just be like a small apartment or something, but they'll employ assistants because they produce generally more pages per week than we do here in America. And so that's just their system. It's not just an illustrator and an inker and a colorist. No, it's assistants could do anything depending on the different artists. A lot of them, though, will be doing things like backgrounds, maybe even other characters. Some people that are older and they're doing manga, it got down to the point where they're just doing the faces and the hands, and everything else is done by assistants. So it depends. But assistants don't always make that much money. So they work under pseudonyms a lot of times because that's their part-time job. But this new system that Japan wants to do with invoices wants to have a publicly available national database. Well, like I say, some of these manga artists want to be anonymous. Forget using a pseudonym for something else. They've got another job, a lot of these people. They might have to work at a restaurant or something like that, or an office. And they don't want to have that reputation of, oh, you've actually also got another job. Like, oh, I don't, that could really mess with people. Yeah, here's something. They have a fan stalking issue. That's a possibility. A hentai artist, right? If you're drawing porn, maybe you don't want to be known that way. DJ Sue, that sucks. Shiro Masamune made a point that no one ever finds out who he is. Exactly. Do they not understand how hostile the creative world is, especially in Japan? Their little corner of the internet is vicious in a totally unique way. Also, this is such a danger to personal privacy. So there are a couple issues here. There's more to say about this. By the way, this image that you see here, that is an actual photo from very recently. There was a meeting amongst representatives of various creative fields, including a bunch for manga and virtual YouTubers that work anonymously and stuff like that, talking about how they want to stop this invoice system. So and one other thing they did, they sent out a poll. So let me go into those details here. So freelancers and sole proprietors will lose their tax-exempt status because invoices will now be subject to a consumption tax. They're going to get taxed more for this stuff. Up until now, basically you could say, if this is my part-time job and I only make a certain amount of money, I can do it anonymously, and there's a tax exemption there. That's not that different from here, just to be clear. You know, if I decided to sell one of my comics that I was talking about here for $500, I don't necessarily have to claim that on my taxes. There's a threshold where you do have to claim it, but there's a certain amount of money you can make. Let me jump to this last bullet point here on this one. They did a survey, they being like a bunch of manga industry representatives. 31% of assistants currently make only 1 to 2 million yen a year. Translating that, we're talking between $7,000 to $14,000 a year. Obviously, well below the poverty line. Another 30% make less than 1 million yen a year. So that's less than $7,000 a year. That adds up to a total of 60% making less than 2 million a year. Do you understand why this is like, you know, they don't want to have to like give their identities and pay the taxes? They're not making that much money. This is definitely a side gig until they can graduate to the next level. An industry advocacy group polled manga creators, and over 20% of them, that's a pretty big chunk, a whole fifth of everybody, feared that this would put them out of business, that they just could not afford to make ends meet under this new invoice system. And out of the 1,275 random people that they surveyed, only 17 were actually in favor of the new system. That's next to nothing. So, just to be clear, sure, some of the absolute biggest manga, you know, like, is One Piece going to end from this? No. You know, somebody like that, Ichiro Oda, if he had to pay more for his assistants, for instance, he's going to be able to. But what about the newcomers that are constantly breaking through? You know, how are we going to find the next Chainsaw Man or the next Demon Slayer if these guys can't really afford to break in anymore? It's a big concern. It's a really big concern. Yeah, many artists tend to live with their parents as they don't make much money. It's a fact. Manga is booming. And once you become that artist, there's good money in it. There's good money in it. Maybe assistants just don't make that much money is all. And it's probably going to take a lot for that culture to change. And when you just change things paperwork-wise, that's a very sudden change. You know, it's not like a gradual, like, hey, next year salaries have to go up 10%, and then the next year they have to go up another 10%, and then the following year we're going to implement this invoice system, and you're going to have to start paying, like you being the assistants and stuff like that, paying more on your taxes if you sort of like gradually get to that point. So it's just going like really fast. Because this was not created, this system was not created with things like manga in mind. And manga is big business, so yeah. What is the likelihood of becoming a manga star? Is it like the odds of becoming a star comic book writer, artist? Less, I would say, because, well, no, there are more people. We do have a higher population and stuff here. And in Japan is still, by the way, the most prolific comic book industry in the world. They do produce more copies of their manga than we do of our comics. So what does that mean for anime? Well, hey, most anime is based off of the manga, so you got to sort of have the horse before the court, don't you? This could sink a lot of niche and small press stuff, no question there. Josei and Seinen don't get that big, but a lot of them have one or two on staff if they do. Yeah, there's plenty of examples. We know, like, if we know an example, it's because it's pretty big. By the time we know about it here in the Western world, it's already going to be huge and have broad appeal over there. Is this new system certain to go forward? It was supposed to go active as of October, but people are sort of objecting to it. Well, I will object to this possibly, Tick Goblin. He says, I guess a lot of doujinshis will go away too. Doujinshi is fan comics. That's usually made by one person in their spare time, and then they just produce it. They're not necessarily creating invoices for people with pseudonyms or anything. Not necessarily. It's possible, but it's not super likely. Let's see. I'm pretty sure the mangaka for Hell's Paradise and Spy Family were assistants to Chainsaw Man's creator at different points. Probably. Japan, France, and USA. Those are the three biggest markets in the world, and USA is too far behind those two. Yep, UK is also big. Argentina is big. There's a couple others, but yeah, those are the biggest. Yep. Let's see, not really government related, but I remember Steve Bissett saying general price increase, i.e. shipping cost, really killed self-publishers in 90s onward. Oh, I could understand that, yeah. Look, I don't mean to be doom and gloom, and it's hard for me to keep up to date on this because most places that were talking about this news were in Japanese. You know, I could read that at like a 1-year-old level. Like it takes me ages to translate each character. You know, and figure out what words they're trying to explain to me. So I'm mostly relying on places that have recapped this for a Western audience. So the news here is a little behind, is all I want to say. It's something I will try to keep up to date on to see if these changes go through and if they actually have an impact. But I've been reading a lot of manga lately. I just have found that I really love binging a whole story. So it's kind of nice to come into a manga after it's been going for a while and be able to read it, like a lot of it, fast. It's kind of nice. It's kind of nice. Next piece of news? Yeah, I think it's time. I think it's time. We've got 4 pieces. 4 more. We talked last week about Mike Hawthorne getting like paltry residuals. This is interesting. Somebody making a comparison of what they get paid well by. Declan Shalvey said that he earns more from Image than Marvel. Specifically, he tweeted this: got paid for Old Dog #1. That's an Image book that he's doing. Not the highest selling book I've ever done, but the most I've ever made off a single issue, having written, drawn, colored, designed the whole thing. Feels amazing to have earned that much all off my own back. Thanks so much to everyone who ordered a copy. Very cool. Declan Shalvey, arguably best known for like creating the design of Mr. Knight, but he's done Thunderbolts, X-Men Unlimited, done tons of stuff. Old Dog, that's his new book. He calls it a spy-fi series, so like a spy series with some sci-fi elements. Deals with a grizzled old guy that's just about to retire, gets pulled back in, sort of a Born Identity type thing. Anyway, that started in September, and I just thought it was interesting to see that you could sell significantly less copies at something like Image. And I think we sort of knew this, and still make significantly more than you do at a place like Marvel. There's a lot of places that you can do creator-owned books now. A lot. And a lot that give you good royalties. So that was interesting for me to read. I'm happy for Declan. I think that that's great news, that he's doing well like that. Any thoughts, any opinions, any commentary before I move us along? I saw this tweet. High five, Deck. There you go. Can I get a bullet point list of everything that I missed? Yeah, you just have to rewind. I do some taxes as grad student because sometimes my stipend gets taxed, but government clearly favors processing income tax from big businesses and organizations. Oh, okay. Interesting. Makoto, are you in Japan? I get the sense that you are. Oh, yes, that was a big one, Arsnaf. I got a very generous super chat, so That was exciting. That was exciting. Thank you again, Nick Barucci and Dynamite Comics. Let's see. A roguish type says, goes back to creators needing to get a bigger piece of the pie when movies make millions. That's true. Okay, good. I just wanted to clarify that when you were talking about your taxes and stuff. Well, thank you for sharing your experience there. Thank you. Getting back into comics over the last few years, my biggest surprise was how great Image has become since the 90s. Image has been great for a long time. They put out, look, not every book they put out is good, but they put out a lot of interesting things, but it's not just Image either, just to be clear. So many publishers are getting close to what Image does. You've got your IDWs, your Boom Studios, your Dynamite. Newer places like Vault seem to be growing. Dark Horse is still hanging in there pretty strong. It's really interesting seeing what they do. Yeah, that's a great point. Ed Brubaker got $5,000 from Marvel for the Winter Soldier movie. He created the Winter Soldier. Ed Brubaker said he got more for his little cameo in the Winter Soldier movie than he did for the comics that it was based on. Yikes. I'm liking Old Dog so far. Really love Time Before Time. Right on, right on. We've got more. This is a little one. Apparently, there's a Popeye manga. King Features Syndicate still making Popeye comics. Someday I'll do an episode, by the way, on the history of Popeye, because you could argue that Popeye was at least a precursor, if not an example, of an early superhero. It's pretty interesting. Oh, yep, Jamilin, yes, TKO has some interesting stuff too. I totally agree. Just a shout out from Steve for a really good issue of a comic book. Yeah, Amazing Spider-Man number 248, The Kid Who Collected Spider-Man. It's a heartbreaker. It's a tearjerker. It's a really good one. Did they end up doing right by Bill Mantlo for Rocket at least? I think so. Before his brother passed away, he said that like Marvel treated him pretty well for Rocket. Anyway, so King Features is releasing a manga-style Popeye story explaining how he lost his eye. I always thought he just squinted. I didn't know he was missing an eye. I literally thought he was always just squinting. Creator Marcus Williams writing and drawing. Here's an example of a page. This is going to be shown on this website, I Lie Popeye. What they're doing is they're sharing each page for 24 hours, once a day for 5 weeks, so that you could jump in, look at some of it, come back the next day, read a little bit more. You can also get it in print on that website. So if you've ever wanted that, there you go. Is Popeye the oldest comic strip which is still being published? Oh, is it? I'm thinking. I'm wondering if Blondie is older. That's the one I'm wondering about. Let me look real quick, because I don't know for sure. Gasoline Alley is still running, apparently. Gasoline Alley started in 1918. Apparently that's still running some places. Wow. I guess the Cats and Jammer Kids did end back in 2006. They'd been going since 1897. So, yeah, that's also a really long-running one. But apparently, yeah, Gasoline Alley is still going. Wow. I didn't know he lost his eye either. Thimble Theater started in the 1920s, I believe. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's. Let me look up the exact year. So that's a couple years after Gasoline Alley. Now, obviously, Popeye's better known, but still. I'm double checking on my little phone. Isn't it amazing that we can just pull up information on a handheld device whenever we want to? just blows my mind. I know that makes me sound like a boomer, but yeah. Thimble Theater started when? 1919. 1919. Okay, so only 1 year after Gasoline Alley. So, wow. Gasoline Alley for the win. Yeah, I did not know that. Wow. iPhone is mother box. Tricorders. Yeah, it's like something out of Star Trek. It really is. It really is. I love the old roots of this medium we love. And that's why I want to do one on Popeye, because look at that. Since 1919, he's been around, and I think comic strips are, clearly very, very similar to comic books. I mean, the first comic books were reprints of comic strips. I think that they've more in modern years, they're much shorter and smaller, but still, Popeye was like ridiculously strong. Not necessarily always as strong as the cartoons made him, but he was like ridiculously strong. And that's why I sort of feel like he's a prototype for the superhero. Prototype. Anyway, it was worth pointing out because I like Popeye. You know what was fun? When I lived in DC, there was a comic book history museum that Steve Jeppy owned and ran in Baltimore. And I went there a couple times, and they had some original art by E.C. Cigar of Popeye. That was really amazing to see that stuff, because you're like, oh my God, this is almost 100 years old. Just incredible to see that stuff, face to face, the comics and the original art. It was really, really cool. At least to me, I thought it was really cool. Yeah, good point. Popeye didn't appear until 1929, but the comic strip, Thimble Theater, that started in 1919. So, yeah, you're right that Popeye himself isn't quite as old. He's 10 years into that strip. Popeye versus Doc Savage, who wins? I always go with the goofy guy that has sort of unlimited powers. So Popeye. Oh yeah, the Spy Museum. Yep, that was very cool. I'm not familiar with Tom Hatton, but respect. It was Olive Oil and her whole family. Castor Oil was also like a pretty big early character in it. Yeah, Popeye didn't come in until 10 years in, and he was just sort of hired to be a what do you call it, just a pilot for their ship. Like they were already on an adventure. But he was so funny. Like readers were just like, oh, please bring this funny guy back. He was really funny because Popeye talks hilarious. We're almost done with news. Got two more pieces here. The Namor movie rights. I thought this was interesting. Obviously, Namor was just in Wakanda Forever, doing incredible numbers at the box office. Whatever, who cares? I guess it's nice for Marvel. But does Marvel have the right to make a Namor movie? No, actually, they don't. One of the producers at Marvel, a guy named Nate Moore, was interviewed by The Wrap. That's one of the Hollywood industry publications. And he revealed that what happened was they sort of borrowed him a little bit, as in Universal owns the rights to distribute a Namor movie in pretty much the same way that they have the rights to do that for a dedicated Hulk movie. What they can do is they can use him as a supporting character. That's why we get to see Hulk in all sorts of Marvel things, but there hasn't been a dedicated Hulk movie since the MCU launched. They did one, and then they've produced or distributed everything else themselves. But yeah, so they can use Namor only as a supporting character for now. And I liked their take on Namor. I don't know how many of you have seen it or liked it. I don't want to spoil anything. I thought he was pretty darn interesting. I liked it quite a bit. And here's the thing, though. There have been rumors that the rights to distribute things will revert back to Marvel in 2023. We'll see. Nate Moore. I think you mean Namor. Well, that's how he pronounced his name, but everybody else in the movie did say Namor. So I love Namor. I thought he was pretty cool. I thought he was pretty cool. Might have been local in LA, but Tom Hatton used to host Popeye cartoons in the 80s. He also drew pretty well, not unlike what you do here. Well, that's very kind of you to say, first of all. That might have been local because I watched Popeye cartoons in the 80s and I don't remember a host. So we'll see what happens. But I'm sure Marvel has plans to continue to use their character. But don't expect in the immediate future a dedicated Namor movie. Because it seems like that is not an option. What else we got? I hope Marvel nails Fantastic Four and, of course, Doctor Doom. Me too. Doctor Doom is a really cool villain. Character-wise, I'm more interested in Namor as a supporting character in a film anyhow, so no company. I think that works fine for now. I think that works fine. If that happens, Chris, I hope we see the 80s Hulk cartoon on DVD. Oh, yeah, that's right, the Hulk cartoon. I forgot about that one. Yep. Let's go to our last piece of news, and this one really just broke just before I started the show, so this is pretty fresh news. Don't have a lot of details, but Frank Miller, yes, the guy that I was complaining about didn't necessarily nail Ronin 2. Well, I still have a lot of respect for him, but we'll see. He's going to write and produce a Corto Maltese show. Corto Maltese. This guy. I don't know if you've ever read any of these. Corto Maltese is a great, great series of comics by a gentleman named Hugo Pratt, an Italian who did a lot of work living in Argentina, actually, the burgeoning Argentinian comic book scene in the 60s. This book started in 1967. Anyway, Frank Miller is going to write and produce a TV show that is funded by Studio Canal. The character is a sailor in the early 1900s, so the early 20th century. He sails around to different lands and reluctantly gets into all sorts of adventures. Honestly, he's a lot like Indiana Jones in some ways. He's not necessarily as book smart as Indiana Jones, but he's a man of some privilege, being the captain of his own ship, and he just ends up getting into all sorts of adventures. He's a very worldly man that definitely knows a lot about the world. And I hope that they come up with a good visual style for the show that does not use that Sin City / The Spirit look. Please, Frank, don't do that to us again. It worked fine for Sin City. It did not really work for the Spirit. And why would they use that? Well, just look at this image here by Hugo Pratt. He was a guy who used a lot of heavy blacks. I always mispronounce it, but that sort of chiaroscuro style. So Corto Maltese, great comics. I was already planning on doing an episode about him at some point. Let's see, but will audiences care if it's so close to Dr. Jones? I'm just trying to find the thing that he's closest to. He's not a replica of Indiana Jones. He's not necessarily that, but Indiana Jones was more of like trying to come up with a take on James Bond, just set in old America. So that Corto Maltese came from different influences. It's cool though. It's cool. The modern Corto comics are be making, but the dudes behind Black Sad. Yes, a Corto Maltese Popeye crossover would be possible. Speaking of TV shows, thoughts on the upcoming Something's Killing the Children TV series by Netflix? I did not hear that rumor. I did not hear that. Let me look that up real quick, see if that's actual news. And if so, I'll talk about that. Let's see. Something. Thanks, phone. Maybe that was already announced. I don't know. Oh, okay. Oh, I see that that was announced quite a while ago. Back in July. I totally, if I covered that in my news here on this show, I totally forgot it. Looks like one of the producers has left. So yeah, maybe I did talk about that in the news a while back. It's hard. Huh. Cool. I don't know if you're talking about Something is Killing the Children or Portal Maltese. Sorry, it was just announced. Yeah. Comic book creator Vic Carabata passed away at the age of 93. He drew Atlas Comics. Yeah, the Marvel sci-fi era. Ah. Which comic artists do you feel transition best into writers? That's an interesting question, Andrew Jefferson. I would put Frank Miller up there, first of all. John Byrne. These are guys that, more I grew up with. Who else? More recently, I think Daniel Warren Johnson I've talked up quite a bit. Who else has done a good transition from being somebody that started as an artist and started writing their own stuff and doing well? I feel like there's tons of examples, and I'm not thinking, well, hey, Jack Kirby. Um, oh, Jim Zub, sure. Howard Chaykin, fair. Daniel Clowes started as just an artist. I did not remember that. I was thinking of him as always having written his own stuff. That's an interesting observation. Yeah, I wasn't thinking of Howard Chaykin um, or Daniel Clowes. Oh, Jeff Lemire, sure. Paul Grist, Ed Brubaker. Oh, by that rationale, I think we have to give it to Brian Michael Bendis. He started writing and drawing his own stuff. The Todd Father, successful. I don't know if I call him the best writer. Oh man, yeah, Walt Simonson, love Walt's stuff. Yeah, and you're right. You know what? George Perez did write a bunch of great stuff. I thought that his Wonder Woman run in the '80s was really strong. Bill Willingham. Yep, there's a bunch now. All of a sudden that we're coming up with. This is great. Yeah, there are a bunch of really good examples of people that have transitioned into becoming really solid writers. Although we thought of them initially as artists. Here's one. Larry Hama. I think that people think of him these days as primarily a writer, but he did start as an artist. So, yeah. John Ostrander. Oh, yeah. Jeff Darrow. Sure. Let's see. Breaking news, the pros and cons Math Magician to fight Red Letter Media's Magician Dracula, Mad Dracula. Oh, man. I should be so lucky. Yeah, Alan Moore did some art, and he's better than you think. Like, Alan Moore is quite a good artist, but yeah. Wait, did Gail Simone draw? I don't remember her ever drawing anything. She sort of broke in because she was doing blogging and stuff like that about comics. Oh, okay, yep. Chip Zdarsky started as an artist. That's a good one. Oh yeah, look, I'm not trying to say that Todd McFarlane is a bad writer. I don't want to say that. He has written some interesting stuff. I would just say that I do still think of him more of an artist, and I don't know. It's on a scale, like how good all these people are. It's on a scale. Yeah, Eric Larson definitely writes all his own stuff now, and he's got plenty of good ideas. Yep. You guys are good at this. Y'all are good. Oh, you're so smart. So damn smart. Well, as usual, I bit off more than I could chew because I just end up having a good time chatting with all of you guys and gals and everyone. And I don't focus enough on drawing faster. That's what I need to do is draw faster. But I'm close to about as much as I can get done during a live show while I chat and share news and stuff like that. Jerry Ordway, sure, we can put him in there. And we can do it. Did I do it? Did it. Mm-mm. Dan Jurgens, yep. Wicked smart? I'm wicked smart. My sister's wicked smart. You kidding? We're both wicked smart. Let's see. What are common stumbling blocks for artists trying to write? Probably focusing too much on world building and not enough on character arcs, or enough on plot, I would say. World building is not always the hardest part. It's coming up with either a really solid plot or at least some really good character arcs to put your characters through. And then coming up with like the one way that they would change is if they went through X, Y, Z. Coming up with that conflict. A lot of people can come up with like, well, what if the world had this and that and the other? I would say that that's a very common thing for people to tell me, like, oh, I have all these ideas for like this amazing world. I just need to hire somebody to actually write the story for me. I'm like, ideas are easy. Ideas, everybody can come up with cool ideas. Everybody can come up with cool ideas. It's the actual sitting down and doing the work of writing and editing and rewriting. That's the stuff that nobody's willing to do except the people that become successful because they're willing to do the work. So, yeah, I get irritated whenever I see like posts of like, I need somebody to write my story. I've got like 2 years worth of a story to tell. I just need somebody to do it for me. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then they're like, and we can split the profits. I'm like, split the profits? Lazy. And then after that, I would say writing convincing dialogue. Even if you have lots of good ideas for plot and character, the next stumbling block for a lot of writers will probably be coming up with convincing dialogue where people aren't just saying exposition, where they don't all sound alike. I would say that those are some of the common stumbling blocks for any early writer. Interesting question. Interesting question. Stream ended up not very laggy after a rough beginning. Oh, good, good, good. Yep, execution is what matters. I agree, Big Gay Dave, and that's just doing the work. Yeah. Getting the flow of a page is hard. Can be. I'm a big fan of structure. So like, you know, if you've got a good reasons, for instance, to break out of like a 3-act structure, fine. But otherwise, you know, don't start with like something and then go like 7 days earlier unless there's a really good reason. Don't end on a downer unless there's a really good reason. You know, that's what I'm like. Otherwise, just stick with what the structure that works. Map out your scenes like on maybe little index cards or somehow notes to yourself, and just go like, okay, you know, like how many pages does this need to take if I'm telling, you know, a 22-page story. You know, I've got like say 6 pages for the first act and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, writing is challenging. I like writing though. I really do. I would say that I'm. Well, you can't ever say that you're good at something. That's for somebody else to say. But I would say I'm a better writer than I am an artist. I just enjoy both things. I wouldn't really call myself a good artist, but I like drawing. Oops, I missed whatever the part there. Let's see. Good dialogue is also something that many writers never learn. Larry Hama, writer, artist, and actor. He's many things, many things. Also, writing for comics, many writers write way too much. Well, that's true. That's true. You know, you need to figure out what can fit in a page, what can fit in a word balloon. Andrew, you're so sweet. You're saying that I'm a good paste maker. Let's see. I think Adrian Tominet's work overall is a great study in watching a primarily artist develop his narrative skills over time. Sure. Don't end on a downer. Somebody tell Brian K. Vaughan. Well, like I say, if there's a good reason, go for it. If it tells you something about the character of that world, it's okay. Sometimes I think people end on a downer without a good story reason. And I'm like, if you don't have a good reason, send people home with a smile. If you've got a good, an especially good reason, sure, do whatever. But otherwise, just follow structure and make people happy. There's nothing wrong with that. Just having fun, doing a little inking here, a little inking here, a little inking there, a little inking everywhere. Has anybody started their holiday shopping yet? I haven't really, and I'm nervous about figuring out what my family all wants. I'd like to see Tarantino write. Thank you, JSA. Tarantino write a comic. Man, that would be cool if he was ever willing to do. Yeah, that would be cool. I read Tominet's new long distance cartoonist book yesterday, cover to cover in one sitting. It's great, isn't it? Pace Pop beats cinematic universe when Kevin Feige realizes that that's something I can do for him, and just that I can make Disney a lot of millions of dollars with the Pace Pop Pete cinematic universe. Yeah, it's something that the fans are asking for. Why aren't you giving them what they're asking for? You guys know. It takes a while for everybody to figure it out. I'm probably going to have a guest in like a week or two on the show. Ed Pizor went to the Tokyo Comic Con this past weekend, and he said that he'd be willing to come on the show and talk about what that's like as a Westerner going to that Comic Con. And then, I know that somebody that's usually here in our chats is Jim Mahfood. He's currently at the Paraguay Comic Con. So both of those guys got to do some pretty interesting stuff. I swear, I feel like the best side benefit to being somebody in comics is that you get invited sometimes to these other countries. Like, I love traveling. I would love to go to any foreign country on somebody else's dime. I would love it. So, but Ed said he'd come on the show and talk about that, and I thought that would be pretty interesting to hear his experience. He and Jeff Darrow hung out for a week or so in Tokyo, and we'll get to talk to him and learn a little bit about what that experience was like. I think we could learn a lot from that. I hope you all agree that that's let's see. Paste Pot needs to lead a new Frightful Four. Yes, I agree. Does smashing your like button help get the Paste Pot Pete movie made? No, but it helps me get seen by more people. So that's always nice. Right. He did do that Django comic. Didn't he also do one with Jason Latour, I feel like? Real life crossover between my favorite channels. Yeah, thank you for the super chat. That's so nice of you. I greatly look forward to hearing Ed's experience over there. Isn't he friends with Peach Momoko too? Yeah, he spent some time with Peach and her husband Yo. He knows a few creators over there, so I think he should have a couple interesting stories that he could share with us about his visit there, and just what it was like. I saw on places like Twitter and Hive some pictures of Tokyo Comic Con, and it sincerely looked a lot like New York and San Diego. So it might not be all that different than what we do. But I want to see, like, yeah, did people recognize him? Did he have a good time at the convention itself? We'll see. We'll see. Yes. Yes. Nick is here and he's promoting himself. I approve of that, Nick. We published the Django Zorro crossover. Yeah. Obviously, Dynamite, you guys sometimes get some pretty amazing stuff in terms of creators. I wanted to show this one again that I've mentioned. This was basically the last thing that Stan Lee came up with for a comic book idea. And so it was called Alliances. And the introductory chapter here is by Wilson Kevin, as you can see, signed my cup. But, there's an example of, like, some big name creators that Dynamite took because, they're smart about stuff like that. But yeah, they did that. They did the Django Zorro book. Some interesting stuff. Some interesting stuff. Look at all these. Hold on. I want to mention this one. He picked up a lot of TMNT doujinshi. I hope he brings some along. I hope so too, and I'll pull out mine because I've got that stuff too. We go to all the same places. I'm jealous that Ed got to go back already, and I haven't. He said that we should go together, and I don't know how realistic that is because I don't have the same sort of flexibility in my schedule because I have a day job. I don't get that much vacation time. It actually took 2 years to put together, and then Quentin came to our 10th anniversary panel. Wow. So Quentin has written, he wrote the book version of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I believe he just wrote another book that was nonfiction, if I'm remembering right. But I would love to see Quentin do some more comics because more or less unlimited budget, and I think that he reins himself in just fine when he can potentially have a big budget. I'm a fan of Quentin Tarantino. I don't think he's made a bad movie. I really don't. Some of them I like way more than others, but he's really interesting as a filmmaker. I don't think we have too many filmmakers like him anymore. I think that there used to be an age of filmmakers that were auteurs. You've still got guys like Spielberg. You've got a couple others today, but mostly it seems like they're work for hire for the studios, and they might have talent, they might have a good visual style, but they don't always put together 100% their own projects. And that's something you used to see from guys like Kubrick, for instance. And yeah. Yes, I was right. Cinema Speculation is Quentin Tarantino's new book. Highly recommended. Okay, that's interesting to know. Yeah, that would probably be super cool. Turn his Star Trek idea into a comic. Why not? Smith is still all his own. That's true. True. I guess I was sort of thinking of things that were aspiring to be a little deeper, but that's maybe picking on Kevin a little bit. My wife really enjoyed Clerks 3, and she hasn't seen Clerks 1 or 2. I was just like, hey, I want to watch this movie out of curiosity. And I was like, it was okay. She really liked it. So, some people really do appreciate his stuff. Oh, that's a great one, Zach. Yes, the Safdie brothers are modern auteurs. You don't see too many of them, do you? Before they sort of get snatched up by the machine, more or less. But I would also argue that Hollywood doesn't necessarily produce movie stars the same way. Like Chris Hemsworth is in like a Thor movie or an action movie, and he'll do great. He'll bring in butts into those seats. But I don't think of him on the same level as I do like an old school guy like Tom Cruise, who's sort of like the last of like a previous generation of actors, where, you know, like if Robert Redford made a movie, people went to see Robert Redford no matter what the movie was. And I don't think you have quite as much of that anymore. I think that people go to see the movie, not necessarily see that actor. I don't know. I would call Christopher Nolan an auteur. Anyway, I got to get going. It's time for me to eat some food. My wife is waiting for me upstairs. I can tell. She made something. So I'm going to take off. I had a great time tonight, though. Thank you all for being here. You were all super nice hitting like, and got a lot of interesting conversation. Thank you for all the super chats. That was obviously like a really good night there. So I appreciate all of that. Didn't really finish Slade Wilson Deathstroke here. That's okay. Can't always finish. But I had fun working on it. And again, if you are interested in that one Kickstarter I mentioned, Claws, that has some early bird things that are only available through midnight Eastern time tonight. So you've got a few more hours there. You've got like 2 more hours to look into whether that's something that you want. But thank you for the nice things. This. Thank you for streaming. Yes, double salute. Boom, boom. Have a great week. Yes, I will. I hope you all have a great week. I sincerely do. Thanks for the stream. Yep. Thank you. All these nice comments. I'm going to take off. I'll see you in a week. Ideally, I can wrap up my next comic tropes before then. It'll be a downer, but I think it's a really interesting one. And I'm getting excited. I'm already putting together I always do it every year, my top 10 comics of the year. It's so hard to narrow it down to just 10, but going to do that soon. Thank you, Gene. Everybody, take care. Keep reading comics.